10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Well, I've always been a collector. You know, at school I collected stamps and so on. But at school I also was encouraged to paint and to pot. And I think this developed a visual sense and a sense of sort of volumes and tactile appreciation of things, what you might call an aesthetic sense, I suppose. And once I came to set up a house and had a small amount of money, I started to accumulate things that would go in it, and sort of naturally these things began to develop along certain lines, and certain themes and interests emerged. The impact of the style of Glasgow when I came here in the 1960s, the end of the century style, when Glasgow being a great city, immediately hit me. And although at that stage I don't think I knew anything at all coherent about Art Nouveau or arts and crafts movement and so on, I was immediately aware that there was this style which was new to me, and was fascinated by it, and began acquiring and accumulating objects. The impact of Glasgow was, first of all, of course, as this homogeneous late Victorian city with some marvellous Art Nouveau buildings in it, very quirky, remarkable buildings. I mean, one thinks of the hat rack, which was a sort of an amazing thing to look at. And of course, above all, the School of Art. And I suppose it was in the School of Art, which, you know, one was and still is able to wander around in remarkably freely, even if one isn't an art student, that I came across, as it were, Art Nouveau interiors, and particularly, of course, Mackintosh's interiors. Because that was, in those days, I don't think there was much else of Mackintosh's open. Oh, of course, the Daly's tea room, you know, Daly's shop, the Willow Tea Room, as it originally was still in operation. The room de luxe upstairs, that was an amazing experience. I remember in those days it was used by brides to try on their dresses. And once or twice I barged in with friends to show them this marvellous interior and found somebody sort of half dressed in a bridal garb. I still have many unidentified and unclassified objects, as it were, in the house, and I'm always hoping to pin them down, to be able to place them in some sort of historical and aesthetic context. At the moment, the immediate concern is to place them in an aesthetic context, that's to say, to arrange things in the house, because otherwise the whole thing becomes such a muddle, not only to visitors who aren't familiar with this type of thing, but even to me. And And I find sometimes that if I acquire a lot of stuff quickly, I do get the sense of being overwhelmed by all the things, because they haven't been put into their appropriate place, and they haven't got the sort of harmony which comes from some sense of balance and rhythm and colour and so on, which I think you must try and impose upon the things if it's not just to become a vast collection of individual bits and pieces. And I do try and remember that the purpose of collecting and creating an environment like a home is to enjoy it. I've always been influenced by William Morris as a thinker and craftsman, and the examples of craftsmanship in Scotland are very remarkable, I think, at that period. I have a number of examples by one woman called Miss de Courcy Luthwaite Dewar, who painted pictures and decorated pottery and made things in silver and jewellery and so on. The painting of the lady on the plaque is interesting. On the back it says E. Burne Jones, H.M. Walton, and it's probably a copy on a Doulton tile of one of Burne Jones's paintings of his model Marie Zambonini, I think her name was. And in the study I have also a cartoon for a tapestry by Burne Jones, and I suppose that was something which perhaps Templetons might have bought and worked up at some stage. I mean, it isn't finished carpet or tapestry, it is just the drawing that would have gone to making this. It's the same design as actually is used in one of his stained glass windows in Salisbury Cathedral. In Glasgow, my main hunting ground has been the Barras. I mean, I go regularly to the Barras every week, and I have acquired an amazing amount of stuff there. Some of it turned out to be, a marvellous bargain. A lot of it, of course, is just run-of-the-mill stuff. But it's great fun to go down there and see what turns up, because you never know. And I think you have to be fairly, as it were, willing to jump from one thing to another there, because I've gone down thinking I might find, say, a pot or a plate, and I've discovered an interesting carpet or a curtain or something like that. And you just have to keep your sort of lively, keep your wits about you, as it were, and see what's going.
What have you got today?
Well, they're not very much.
That's nice, Diane, isn't it?
Yes, a little bit about Barras.
Well,
I've got 750, but a percentage on it, do you need a reduction?
yes.
Go to 1910, 1920s, 1910, 1920s. Very underpriced.
I think it's been the fun of backing one's own taste and judgment, and the advantage of this has been, of course, that I've often, because I've been in advance of taste in some areas, I've been able to acquire things that have been cheap and plentiful. The disadvantage, of course, is that one's own friends often think they're not only cheap but nasty. The collection does dominate in the sense that, for instance, if we want to have a dinner party, it means more or less a week of clearing stuff out of one room in order to change it from a junk store or a study into a dining room. But then the nice thing about that is that when you make an effort for something like a dinner party, I have things like cutlery and china and so on, which is interesting and can be used on these occasions, but whereas normally it's hidden away. So I enjoy that sort of thing. The everyday business of life, a kitchen is a funny mixture, and those who use it are always complaining about the lack of space in it, but I suppose my everyday demands are not very great, and I managed to confine them to a corner of the kitchen, which is workaday 20th century, whereas some of the rest of it is getting taken over by the encroaching clutter. Books, as you can see in the study, I mean, and everywhere else, accumulate at a rapid rate. But I do collect them for two reasons. One reason, of course, is, as in the case of the marvellous run of studios that I have, they are marvellous tools for doing a bit of research on the period and finding out about what one is collecting. But also, I think they're little works of art in themselves, and I think that this period, the turn of the century, was a particularly good period for book production after the rather ghastly standards of printing in the mid-Victorian period. Standards of printing improved rapidly, and the standards of binding and illustration in particular were very high, and some of the finest Art Nouveau and arts and crafts artists did their best work for books, I think. And of course, again, Scotland been particularly remarkable in that field. It's obviously a reproduction of the famous painting by the Master of Moulins in the Kelvin Grove Museum. But who did the glass reproduction of it is unknown. It's probably by Guthrie and Wells, who were a famous firm of glassmakers at the end of the century and did a lot of the stained glass in Glasgow's houses and so on. I sometimes think that perhaps it was commissioned by the McClellan family. When they gave the painting as part of the McClellan bequest to the city, they might have decided to keep, as it were, a glass copy as a remembrance of it. But this is pure speculation. I suppose it becomes an obsession when it becomes a nuisance, and when it comes first, as it were, in life, and you have to start reorganizing your life round about it. That's when it really becomes an obsession. I suppose I am an obsessive collector in the sense that I'm always buying small things, if not big things. But I myself maintain that I'm not obsessed by it, that I got plenty of other interests in my work and in my ordinary social life, and I hope I'm not a bore with it. I'm always reminded of the story Lord Clark has in his autobiography about him visiting Sir William Burrell's castle and remarking to Burrell on how fine a carpet he was standing on, and Barras said, yes, and there are 5 others underneath it. I sometimes think this house is a bit like that too. I mean, not in the sense of having the value of the Barrel collection, but being chock-a-block with layers and layers of things. If you look under any bed, you'll be amazed what you will discover. I'd be amazed myself, probably.